So it's 1971, and this billionaire has not been seen publicly now for over a decade. But this guy, a journalist, manages to convince the biggest publishing company in America that he's been secretly meeting with the billionaire. But the truth is, he had never met this billionaire in his life, and somehow he was able to successfully swindle this big publishing company of about $750,000. This is the story of Clifford Irving, a man who pulled off what people still call one of the greatest scams in American history. You are welcome to Crime Time 101. So Clifford Irving is this moderately successful writer living on this beautiful Spanish island called Ibiza with his Swiss-German wife Edith. And Clifford is a pretty ambitious guy. He wants more fame, more money, more everything. And so one day, he runs into his old friend while waiting for a boat, a guy named Richard Susskind. And they start talking about this legendary billionaire who nobody had seen in public since 1958. His name? Howard Hughes. Now, Howard Hughes had quite the fascinating life. He was a rich kid who decided to pour his money into two of his big passions in filmmaking and aviation. His love for flying really took off in the early 1930s when he founded his own aircraft company and started designing planes himself, even testing them personally. But things took a dramatic turn in 1946 when he crashed one of his own planes. He was lucky to survive, but that accident seemed to trigger a major shift in his life. After the crash, Hughes retreated from the world, and he ended up moving to the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, basically living in seclusion on the top floor. He became this mysterious figure that hardly anyone ever saw, which naturally led to all kinds of speculation and rumors about what he was up to. Rumors were going around that he was dead, or maybe completely insane, or even some illness. But no one really knew for sure, and that's when Clifford gets this wild idea. And so, he turns to Richard and says,
"What if we pretend Hughes hired me to write his autobiography?"
Now remember, this is the early 70s. There was no internet and no easy way to verify things. And this Hughes guy was so secretive that even his closest business associates hadn't seen him in years. And so Clifford decides to take advantage of the whole situation. He wants to convince this huge publishing company called McGraw-Hill that Howard Hughes personally selected him to write his life story. But here's where it gets tricky. Now Clifford needs to forge letters from Hughes to prove his credibility, and so his plan can work. So what does he do? So he finds a Newsweek letter with Hughes' handwriting in it and starts learning how to copy it. Clifford then calls his friend Richard and tells him,
"Look, we'll say Hughes approached me because he liked my last book and that he's paranoid about meeting in public. So our meetings are secret, and Hughes also insists on absolutely no publicity."
Clifford also tells the publishers that Hughes doesn't want to sign anything in person, and these publishers are falling for it. They're so excited about getting the Hughes autobiography that they're not asking the real questions. Meanwhile, Clifford's wife, Edith, is busy setting up a Swiss bank account under the name H.R. Hughes. These guys really thought of everything. So Clifford goes to McGraw-Hill with these forged letters, acting all mysterious about his relationship with Hughes, and they're absolutely thrilled. I mean, they're practically throwing money at him. At first, they offer him a $500,000 advance, which is massive in 1971. The offer was that Clifford would get $100,000, and Hughes supposedly gets $400,000. But then, Clifford gets greedy. Clifford then tells them Hughes wants more money, and instead of getting suspicious, they actually agree. The deal jumps to $750,000. But wait, how is Clifford going to cash checks made out to Howard Hughes? Well, that's where his wife comes in. Edith gets a fake passport in the name of Hughes, opens a bank account, and starts depositing these huge publisher checks. So now Clifford and Richard have the money. But they still have one tiny problem. They need to actually write a book about Howard Hughes without ever having met the guy. Now here's where Clifford gets lucky. Remember, he needs to make this book seem authentic, right? Well, It just so happens that his friend Stanley Myers shows him a manuscript of an unpublished biography of Hughes, written by Noah Dietrich, Hughes' actual right-hand man for over 30 years. So Clifford, without telling anyone, makes copies of this manuscript. And now, he's got first-hand insider information direct from Hughes' former best friend. And so he and Richard were all set to start building their fake autobiography using this real information. And so they're working frantically, piecing together details about Hughes' life from everything they can find, magazines, newspapers, and even meeting with people who knew him. But see, Clifford is starting to get distracted because now he's busy spending publisher money to fly to different locations, having affairs with his mistresses while pretending to interview Howard Hughes. At this point, Clifford was feeling on top of the world, like he just pulled off one of the greatest schemes of all time. So by fall, Clifford and Richard finish this massive manuscript, and they submit it to McGraw-Hill. The company reads it, and they're over the moon. Now it's December, and McGraw finally announces the book.
Coming soon, the authorized biography of Howard Hughes.
And so, it makes headlines everywhere. And Clifford's sitting pretty. He's got his money, the book's ready to go, and everything seems perfect, right? But then, the phone rings at McGraw-Hill. And guess who's on the line? It's Howard Hughes himself, and he's furious. Now remember, Hughes hadn't spoken publicly for 14 years, but he's so angry about this fake autobiography that he calls the people at McGraw, saying he's never met any Clifford Irving and never authorized any book. And now Clifford's phone starts blowing up. All the executives at McGraw are pissed and need answers. He doesn't panic though. Instead, he moves on to phase 2 of his plan. So since the rumors were already spreading like wildfire, he was going to come out publicly and defend himself. And so he goes on television claiming the voice on the phone wasn't really Hughes, that it must be an imposter who is trying to ruin his image. And so McGraw invites Clifford to their office to take a lie detector test, because at this point they still gave Clifford the benefit of doubt. So the next day, Clifford is at their office. He starts the lie detector test, but doesn't finish. He claimed he needed to go back to Ibiza due to a medical emergency. And even at that, the partial results still showed that Clifford was inconsistent with his answers. Now at this point, Howard Hughes has had enough of the games. And so, on the 7th of January 1972, he decides to surprise Clifford and the world. Hughes arranges a telephone press conference with 7 journalists, which was supposed to broadcast on national television. And for the first time in 14 years, the public hears Hughes' voice, declaring Clifford's book as a complete fraud. But Clifford still won't give up, because now he goes on television again, this time on CBS with Mike Wallace, claiming the voice from the telephone conference wasn't really Hughes, and that it was the same imposter coming for him again. And by now, Clifford's moves are starting to raise suspicion, and his lies are starting to catch up with him. But meanwhile, the Swiss police are investigating that fake bank account they forged to receive the money, and they figured out that the picture attached to it looked suspiciously like Edith Irving, Clifford's wife. And now, an anonymous person connects the dots between Clifford's manuscript and the unpublished Dietrich book, and goes to the police with the information. Now the police does some digging and find out that indeed, Clifford ripped the information from that manuscript. And in the process of their investigation, they also find out that the airline records show that Clifford wasn't where he claimed to be during those secret meetings with Hughes. And remember Clifford's mistress? All of a sudden, she comes forward and confirms that she was with Clifford during the times he claimed to be meeting Hughes. By this time, Clifford's world had come crashing down, and so he goes into hiding with the gang. Finally, on the 28th of January 1972, Clifford and Edith publicly confess the whole thing was a hoax. Every letter, every meeting, every claim, all fake. And the media goes absolutely wild. At this point, the case even had more TV time than even the ongoing Vietnam War. Now Clifford, Edith, and Richard are facing serious charges: grand larceny, forgery, conspiracy, perjury. And after everything, they had successfully stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars and embarrassed some of the biggest companies in America. So now, it's June 1972, and they're all found guilty. Clifford gets 2.5 years in federal prison. Edith gets 2 years but serves just a couple months. And Richard gets 6 months. But here's the ironic part. Clifford Irving became famous after all, but this was the bad type of fame. Funny thing is, the fake autobiography he wrote actually got published in 1999 on the internet. So the guy who wanted fame and fortune got infamy instead. He tried to exploit a reclusive billionaire's privacy and ended up exposing his own deception instead. Sometimes, the truth really is stranger than fiction.